right, so good evening. We have invited several members of several district leaders in the Kings County Democratic Party, as well as Assembly Member Robert Carroll, to talk about the recent rules changes. So I'd like to give them a chance to introduce themselves with their name, district, and pronouns, and then we will move right on into it. So Doug, since you've been to the most of our meetings, you could go first.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Doug Schneider. I am the Democratic District Leader for the 44th Assembly District. My pronouns are he and him, and I am also a candidate for council in the 39th Council District, and it is good to be here and see everybody as always, and I hope everybody is safe, healthy, and sane.
All right. Jesse, would you like to go ahead?
Yes, thank you, Sarah. So nice to see all of your faces. I know a few of you, I think, from New Kings Democrats. My name is Jessie Pierce. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And I am the newly elected district leader in the 52nd Assembly District, which is Carroll Gardens, downtown Brooklyn, Brooklyn Heights, Cobble Hill, Gowanus, Prospect Heights, a little bit of Park Slope.
Samy, did you want to go ahead?
Hi, thank you. Yes, this is Samy Nemir Olivares. I'm the district leader of Assembly District 53rd. That means Williamsburg, East Williamsburg, and Bushwick. And my pronouns are he and they. Thank you for the invitation.
All right. Kristina, go ahead.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. My name is Kristina Naplatarski. I'm the newly elected district leader for the 50th Assembly District. So that is Greenpoint, Williamsburg, and small bits of Fort Greene and Clinton Hill. So thank you so much for the invitation. Really looking forward to this discussion. And she, her pronouns. Thank you.
Julio, are you with us? If you want to introduce yourself, name, pronouns, location.
Yes, hi everyone. My name is Julio Peña, the third newly elected district leader in the 51st Assembly District, which is Central Park, Red Hook, and parts of Park Slope, Greenwood, and Bay Ridge. And excited to be back with my peeps at SCDUP.
All right, and last but not least, Assembly Member Carroll.
Good evening. Thank you, Sarah. I'm Assembly Member Robert Carroll. I represent the 44th Assembly District in the New York State Assembly, and my pronouns are he and him. Thank you for having me.
All right, so thank you all for joining us, and we're hoping at first we could spend just a brief amount of time talking about the recent rules changes and the reasons you guys oppose them.
Should any of us start, Sarah? Would you prefer?
Yeah, go ahead, Jess.
Yeah,
go ahead, Jessie.
Well, I don't want to step on your toes, Doug. But I'll Doug doesn't mind. I'll just speak really briefly. I think there were two parts to this rules change. The first is to really limit, aka not really have the organizing meeting, which I believe a lot of you are active county committee members, and the organizing meeting from the 2-year term that you're in county committee is really the meeting for setting up the party, where you get a chance to vote on the chairs and officers of the county committee, and it's really the whole reason to be involved the way that it's been structured in the past, that's where most of the participation, where it really matters. And so one, it's just completely eliminating the organizing meeting. And then the second was instead of people being able to opt in to opting into giving their proxies to somebody else that they trust, your proxy being your vote, of course. The default was that every county committee member within a certain assembly district, their votes would be defaulted to the district leaders unless they specifically opted out of giving their vote. I think just highlighting the fact that there wasn't going to be a meeting, which I think is the whole point of engaging and encouraging participation in the broader Brooklyn Democratic Party. And people worked for their signatures in a pandemic, and so I think earned the right to be part of that meeting. And then second, to have your vote stripped away without unless you opted out of your vote going to your district leader. Also very much, I think, stood against just basic democratic principles of encouraging people to participate and not de facto removing their vote and then giving it to their district leader, which one, may not be something that they want to do, but two, like completely removes the ability to give your vote to somebody you trust.
Right.
And I think also, sorry.
Go ahead.
And I think, for me, to piggyback, it also, the rule specifically prohibited the use of teleconferencing, which I feel like is complete asinine. I think, in this health pandemic, it's like the primary method by which like 99% of the world is communicating right now. And if you're limiting the only method by which most people are communicating and like running government, I don't understand how you're going to like hold a meeting. And like, I think we all agree that the rationale, part of it made sense. I think not everyone has access to technology. So like, let's find a way to work to bridge that gap, but assume like completely taking away that option for everyone doesn't, like, you're disadvantaging everyone because, not a small few don't have access to technology, and that just didn't make sense.
For
Also,
me, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Sarah. I was just going to very quickly, also on the proxies, I don't remember, Jesse, did you mention that you also can't submit the proxies electronically? You had to have, they had to be original signatures, which is crazy because number one, in general, electronic signatures are valid for court documents. They're valid even before COVID. But also since COVID, Andrew Cuomo passed a number of executive orders that expand the areas where electronic signatures are allowable. So it was ridiculous before COVID that we weren't allowed to use electronic submission. It's even more ridiculous now.
All right, so if we're done answering the what happened, I was hoping we could shift into discussing the fact that it kind of seems that while the party was busy litigating, that as many as 3 districts and certainly 1 congressional district in southern Brooklyn flipped from blue to red. We're wondering what advice you have moving forward and if there is a better way you think the party could have used the time and energy.
Hi, this is Samy. I want to answer the first one because I think it's very important to understand why we keep failing, right? Why these things happen, right? To understand how we move forward. I think what it was so frustrating and disappointing to begin with, it is not, it is not the conversation about digital mailer. They want to us to get lost in those details. I think the overarching detail is the way in which the state and the Brooklyn Democratic Party for many years have tried to squash the voices of the organizing, of county committee members, of progressive voices, of young people, of people of color. So county committee represent a threat to the powers to be. district leaders who wants to stay in power, for, you know, the leadership of the Democratic Party that wants to reign their power, because they have none, because they have not organized sufficiently or enough in their district. So they want to make sure that they retain the powers of district leader, so they can provide jobs at the Board of Election as poll workers. They can put people to work on the Board of Election. They can sell judgeships. They can get donations from people who want to be judged and their families. They can also get donations from people who wants to get close to the Brooklyn Democratic Party, like charter schools and other corporations. So I think that to the extent that this comes to light, and to the extent that progressive district leaders and others, county committee members know the information, know what's happening, and can vote, they feel threatened. So this is an attempt to silence voices, and to make sure that the county committee members who are getting organized and wants to see the Democratic Party moving into a direction that is more engaging, more inclusive, and more diverse, does not have that opportunity. And they keep that power that is a very hierarchical one. So as our communities engage, and young people and everyone, honestly, wants to see a more grassroots effort, the Brooklyn Democratic Party, meaning like Frank Serio and those, keep, you know, conglomerating the power on district leaders. And that's not the way to go. As we've seen, that's what we fail in those races, and we will continue to fail. That's what some of them lost their own seats, like Felix Garcia and others, because they do not engage at the local level. And that's the grassroots aspect, the county committee members. So anything else are excuses, and there are just ways to distract. As my colleagues mentioned, how you argue that making a meeting virtual that can actually improve the chances of seniors, of low-income people, and people with disabilities to attend, rather than doing it in Coney Island, that it takes 2 hours to go. You have to pay $100 to go. And from the closeness of getting a phone call, that all seniors have a phone, can participate meaningfully in a meeting. So it is counterproductive. It flies on the face of reality, and it's so gross and disappointing. I am so tired and sick. And the fact that they're now trying to turn this into us, it's really frustrating. And they also are using our LGBTQ community. They put out a press release, like using as an excuse the gender task force that has nothing to do with this. And it's really disappointing and frustrating. So that's why they keep continue fighting. So what we need to do is continue to organizing and making sure that we bring this to light and let people know what is happening. So many people are frustrated, many county committee people are frustrated, but we're fighting here, and it seems that we're just flying into a wall. So until the Brooklyn Democratic Party does not, and the state Democratic Party does not come to terms that our demographics are changing, that our voters are changing, and that we demand better, they're gonna keep losing. So I am very encouraged by you all coming into these terms, and the other district leaders that are advocating for this. So the pressure is that we need this first thing, that we need to make these meetings public. There's no way where we keep operating on the shadows. We need to make sure that the Brooklyn Democratic Party is providing county committee members with actions, right? We is so, and I'm sorry I'm taking too much time, and with this I'm
keep
gonna
going.
end.
You're doing awesome.
But in times where we had one of the most consequential elections of our times, which was the Trump election and Biden administration, we did not receive any sort of guidance by the Brooklyn Democratic Party as to what sort of organizing we were gonna do, right? When we had these local races in Brooklyn, we had received no whatsoever guidance as to how can we support other races. So now they're trying to do a fundraising that is gonna have a $25,000 ticket after all of this happened. That's not gonna work, because those are no voters, you know? We need to be talking to voters. We need to talk about Brooklynites, and that's not the way to talk at them, right? We We need to be talking with them, and not from the top down, but from the bottom up. And who does that? County committee members, the 2 and 4 people who ran to represent their blocks. And until we don't give them a platform and a voice for them to organize, we're gonna keep failing. So I'm very disgusted, by the way. It's really frustrating to be part of this system. So if we need to reform it completely. And talking about reform, when the Brooklyn Board of Election was failing, when those 100,000 ballots were wrongly sent, the Brooklyn Democratic Party and the State Party didn't even, made a meeting with the district leaders and the stakeholders to say, okay, this is what we're gonna do. We need to advocate. To the contrary, you know what they said when I brought it up? They said, oh, we cannot, make this a big noise because we are gonna be attacked. And I'm like, who cares who's gonna be attacked? This is our responsibility. We are disenfranchising voters, so we need to do better. And that's why I voted against canceling this illegal meeting, because that's what a judge said. And let me tell you, if in appeal this is reverted, this is just, it raises the question about the undue influence that district leaders have with the appointment of judges. So we also need to reform that.
So Sarah, this is Assembly Member Carroll. Your question about the congressional, state senate, and assembly race that are possibly looking to flip to Republican hands is a good one. Max Rose, of course, as all of you know, has conceded that race is lost. We will start counting on Monday for the state senate and state assembly race in Brooklyn. And I think those are going to be very, very close. I am cautiously optimistic that Andrew and Mathilde will, in fact, win when all the votes are counted. But I think it will be close no matter what, whoever is the eventual victor. If you look at where the votes came from, there are definitely some places for concern for both Andrew and Mathilde. I don't think they're going to see as overwhelmingly a Democratic absentee rate as some of our colleagues in Long Island and upstate New York saw. But that's just a guess. But your broader question is, we definitely saw an uptick in support for Donald Trump in this last election in Brooklyn, and that is disconcerting. And I think that's disconcerting because it shows that we're missing a huge swath of voters who feel disaffected. And that's a problem. And I think Brooklyn is different than the nation as a whole, but it has a lot of similarities as well. I think one of them is really connecting with working class voters to make sure that they understand that if you're a worker, no matter your background, the Democratic Party has been there to fight for fight for labor rights, to fight for $15 minimum wage, to fight against harassment. And I think those are important. And we need not forget those foundational principles, because if we do forget those foundational principles, it allows for somebody who's as vile as Donald Trump to make inroads into a whole host of communities. And that is really concerning. And this pivots to one other thing. We should know by now who won these races. The state legislature needs to pass simple legislation that will allow the Board of Elections to count and canvass absentee ballots as they come in, which the states of Florida, Ohio, Colorado, and a whole host of other states, Wisconsin, do this. And if we were to do that, we would have known our election results no later than Wednesday afternoon, like Wisconsin. And what it would do is it would switch the way in which our absentee ballot process works. Right now, if you request an absentee ballot, you have an absolute right to go to your polling place and vote early or vote on election day. And because of that, what happens is you vote on a normal ballot. And so it's then after the fact that we then decide whether the absentee ballots are valid, because we assume that you may have gone and voted on election day or early. We should reverse that. We should say, look, if you request an absentee ballot, we're assuming you're going to send it in. If for some reason you don't send it in and you want to go vote early or on election day, you have that right, but we'll do it on a provisional ballot. And then we'll just double check to see if you put in your absentee ballot or not. That would make it much simpler because a much smaller percentage of folks would end up falling into that category.
Sarah, 1 second, real quick, I want to respond as well. First of all, I want to say that I have not heard what the count of absentee ballots were in the 44th, but I do want to congratulate Assemblymember Carroll on his re-election as well.
Thank you, Doug.
Yeah, he actually did have an opponent. So I think to just respond to your question about the kind of the connection between the party and local elections here, I think that there's a lot of things that factored in. I think that off-year elections are always going to be different, or midterm elections rather, are always going to be different than presidential years in terms of who comes out to vote, but also the resources that we allocate to any given race. And so it's hard to get people to focus on a Southern Brooklyn state Senate race when they want to focus on a South Carolina Senate race. And I think that dynamic is kind of where the party's failing really comes in, because nobody else is going to be able to organize the way that we need to organize to get the numbers we need to those races. And so, Andrew really could have benefited, and Mathilde really could have benefited by the type of things that we were doing. So for example, right, I hosted a weekly phone bank, right, for the presidential, and I tried to do some text banking and phone banking for Andrew. But we really needed something, like the party should have been hosting, weekly phone banks, not for local candidates as well. Where was the Brooklyn Democratic Party's effort? Where was our Zooms for Andrew? What is our purpose? And this is an ongoing debate about, and this is really at the heart of the kind of the reform versus current county fight, is what is the purpose of county committee of the Brooklyn Democratic Party, if not to get Democrats elected in Brooklyn? And that is an area where we fall short in our effort time and time again. But there are people who don't see that as a pressing issue. I think, and I don't know the reason. I don't know if it's deals that have been made in the past. I don't know if it's because we assume that in every area of Brooklyn, Democrats are going to win. But I think it is a mistake. And I think it is something that really, really harmed our candidates' chances in this election.
Sarah, can I just say one thing before you jump to the next thing, kind of to highlight, piggybacking off of what Doug said? I think that's all really important, and kind of highlights that there's this divide, right? That there's the general public, majority of the general public is becoming increasingly aware since Trump was first elected about politics at the national level. Right. And then the Brooklyn Democratic Party is continuing to feed into that and isn't doing enough to ensure that folks know what is going on locally, and in saying to people, look down your ballot, look at the race that is happening over like right next door to you, right? There's this big disconnect. And another reason why, in addition to the reasons that Doug pointed out as to why it's important that we pay attention locally, I think another thing is just from a strategic standpoint, it is within the communities, it is grassroots organizing that makes sure that the messaging and the communication and the persuasion is really targeted to a community, right? Like there's now this discussion, you know, I'm sure everyone's seen AOC weighing in on whether the Democratic Party has correct messaging. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach, I think is something that's critical. And so if you tap into a community, and if the Brooklyn Democratic Party were to localize their efforts and really engage the grassroots, then we'd be able to say like, hey, there's a race, there's a really contentious race going on. Your assembly district, your congressional district might flip from blue to red. Help us. What do people need to hear? What do your neighbors need to hear? What that's going to be receptive to them?
Yeah, well said.
Hey, I don't know if we can speak about what went down, but me and Peter are Democratic County Committee members that were newly elected. And we had a really difficult election because we are in the district, we are in Assembly District 47. And during our election, our assemblymen and three district leaders
was Charles Ragusa, Nancy Tong, and Ari Kagan. They all signed a letter basically saying that we ran on basically increasing voter turnout, engaging and registering new voters, and they chose to focus on we support to fund the police. They said we were going to bring rioting and looting to the area.
And in these letters, they sent 3 separate letters out, our assemblymen.
And so now we're expected to hand our votes over to these same people who have stood in our way in engaging voters in our district every step of the way.
Just so you know, before we went out and canvassed before the pandemic really hit. And so we walked around and talked to the people in our neighborhood to get the signatures. And it's frustrating to see like the people who we were pushing to try and work with to go out of their way to try and make us seem like we were somehow outsiders from the party. I have grown up in this neighborhood my whole life, and I was so angry to hear that. And also,
and on top of that, sending 3 mailers for us and sending 0 mailers for Andrew Gennardis, who ran in this
That's
district.
what I was gonna say. Yeah. We are from the district that Andrew Gennardis is in. I grew up in Gravesend, and I supported Mathilde when she ran the first time. We know this area, we know this district. Like, if the Democratic Party was worried and concerned about this stuff, they had us there to help them. And instead it felt like they spent more time, even my local politicians spent more time trying to make sure we didn't have our vote and our voice. And we are willing to volunteer our time. We will be there for Gennardis and Mathilde because we volunteer our time for this position.
We support the same things. I just don't understand why they're trying to squash any kind of basically retaliation or I don't know, like just basically we're not retaliating. We're in the same party. We're not dissidents. We're not partisan.
And realistically, this idea that, you know, this area is like, well, you should have just figured it was going to be close in this district. I don't think people are really talking to the people in the community of this neighborhood. I don't think people are reaching out, and they're reaching out in this district because they're immediately assuming that everyone in this area is just going to be conservatively voting. And I don't believe that, because I see a lot of working class people in this area who do not have that mindset all the time. So we need to reach out to them, and we're not. So thank you for listening to all of that, because it has been a frustrating few months as soon as we saw this stuff going down. So everybody who went out there and all the district leaders who voted no, thank you, because you did that for us, because we're just Democratic County Committee members who want to be active in our community. And I think that that's what everybody who joined wants. So thank you.
That actually tied into where the next question I had was going, which was that many of us in this group, most of us really live in red Brooklyn, both politically and COVID-wise until recently. What activation would you guys like to see happen, and on what timeline? Like, do we see it before the 2021 city council races? Do we see it before the 2022 state and federal races? Like, how can we activate our base in Southern Brooklyn? And what would you think it would take?
So I'm not, I am from Greenpoint, Williamsburg, very blue. So I don't have experience with this. So I'd say like, you know, a lot of it is going to how you approach folks in your community is really going to come kind of from your knowledge just as being residents there. But I think that there's always, Democrats tend to like rest on their laurels, and like when like get a victory, they just want to be like, okay, that's it, we won, you know, let's celebrate until we've got a challenge again. But I think there's always organizing work that can be done, even on off years. And I think that a lot of that just starts with basic civic education. So to give an example, the 2021 races, the city races are all going to be using ranked choice voting, right? So starting a campaign around that is something that is simple, effective, and is just able to get folks more involved for when the persuasion work around candidates starts to happen. And I think that, you know, sometimes, especially for folks who are tied into politics, we tend to forget that a lot of this information is not general knowledge. There are a lot of people who simply just don't understand what their council member does, what their assembly member does, and that's absolutely fine. So I think it's just always a plus to help educate people, and it will also hopefully help to further goals in terms of getting more Democrats in these seats.
Sarah, this is Assemblymember Carroll again. Look, it's a wonderful question of what you can do to kind of build out a base of support. And I think Kristina's right. Look, there's a lot of things, and you can't rest on your laurels. I think also, you know, the borough's dynamics are very different from the 2/3 to 3/4 of it that is very overwhelmingly Democratic, to this few sections of it that are rather split down the middle. And also because of our closed primary system, you know, primary elections and general elections oftentimes look wildly different. And up until very recently had wildly different swings of voter participation. We had some of the most anemic voter participation in New York City in our Democratic primary, basically until Donald Trump was elected. Any election previous to Donald Trump, the Democratic primary, the turnout was between 4% and 8% of the electorate as a whole. And you know, was 20% of the Democratic Democratic registrants. And so that does then cause some of these issues. I would not be, Andrew Gennardis and Mathilde are both colleagues of mine in Albany. I have known Andrew personally for well over a decade, and I consider him a friend. And I've only known Mathilde for these last 2 years, but I think she's a smart, thoughtful person. I would be really upset to see both of them go. I have good feelings about both of them, so I don't want to say that that's going to happen. But I also don't want to put too much emphasis on two elections where there was an unbelievable turnout among base supporters of Donald Trump in those sections of of their districts. That does also happen in elections. Elections sometimes really are snapshots, and you don't want to dwell and say, well, because what happened 2 weeks ago, that's going to happen 2 years from now or 4 years from now. It's always very dynamic and changing, and we should know that, and we should prepare for that. And I think lots of things are in our favor to keep expanding the Democratic base in New York City and throughout the country.
Doug, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I have to go because I have to cook dinner for my family so that everybody can eat. But I wanted to very quickly just give an update on the litigation that is still occurring over the rules changes that were made. For those that don't know, the party was sued for failure to hold the meeting. The plaintiffs in that lawsuit won, and the party was ordered to hold a meeting within 45 days of the judge's decision. The party then appealed that decision. So there's an appeal. All of the district leaders on this call, as well as several others, put out a statement, condemning the decision to appeal. And then two things have happened since then. Number one, in a sign that is good for the plaintiffs, the parties went to the appellate court and sought an injunction, a temporary restraining order, to put the lower court's decision on hold so that they wouldn't have to hold the meeting pending the outcome of the appellate division decision, and it was denied. After that, and this is something that people should be aware of if their ADC is considering meeting, is that one of the ADCs held their meeting and filed the certification with the Board of Elections, stating that they were the legally constituted members of the county committee, which the party then turned around and filed a new motion with the trial court, with the court that initially decided with them, saying, hey, look, they're suing us, claiming not to be county committee members, but here they put in this paper that says they are county committee members. Therefore, Judge, you should overturn your prior decision. I think it has a minuscule chance of succeeding for a variety of reasons I won't go into, but I think we do want to be careful about doing it. The more ADCs that meet before the meeting is held, the more ammunition we give them. So I want to say, just to urge that little bit of caution, that we may want to hold off our ADC meetings until this is decided. With that, unless anybody has a question for me, yeah, David.
Can I jump in here? I want to define. I don't think we defined what an ADC is. So an ADC stands for Assembly District Committee, and it's basically a meeting of all county committee members within the same assembly district, and they have certain powers given to it by the Brooklyn Democratic Party rules in terms of what their purpose is and what their goal is. But many ADCs that have formed in the last 2 years have taken it upon themselves to try to increase civic engagement, to increase information about judges running, things like that aren't necessarily part of their mandate, but are something that motivated, politically conscious people altogether can do.
Thank you, David. You're right. I should have defined it. I'm gonna hop off and go make dinner, but I do want to say one thing, which is that in my first term, from 2008 to 2020, it was very lonely when we had these votes, and to be the one that everybody was pointing and yelling at. And I got to tell you what a difference this one was, and how much of a breath of fresh air it was to have this group of district leaders, this group of newly elected district leaders, who are committed to doing this and were amazing at this meeting. I was inspired by them, and Jesse, Kristina, Julio, Samy, Shaquana were all. It was great to work together as a team, and the fastest way to change this is to add more district leaders. So if you're considering running for district leader, that's the best way to make this change the fastest. And with that, unless anybody wants to ask me a question before I go, I'm going to go make sloppy joes.
Doug, I have a question.
Yes, Marion.
I heard what you said in terms of not giving the plaintiffs ammunition, but
yeah.
In the chat, people are talking about whether to organize or not to organize. And so is there a difference between trying to get it together to organize committee and meeting? in terms of this whole bigger picture?
Yes.
Can you
yes.
flesh it out a bit?
Yes. No, absolutely. Well, you can hold a meeting. You just don't want to claim to be you don't want it to be an organizing meeting where you claim to be a legally constituted ADC at the end. And I'm supposed to talk to Tony at 6 o'clock tonight to try to flesh this out and just make sure that if and when we host a meeting, that we do it in a way that that doesn't jeopardize the larger cause.
Because I think it would help people to take the cue from Shaquana. I think not to wait, to associate, to get together and support each other in a networking.
Thank you, Marion. All right, goodbye, everybody. Thank you all.
Great. So the last question I have is financial. It seems a lot of the outreach from the party and from campaigns prioritize donations over organizing and actually reaching out to the electorate. In some cases, Democrats outspent Republicans 2-1 in races they lost nationally. On top of that, our local party has known financial management issues as well. How can we change that?
Yeah, this is Samy. Well, there's a lot. First, we need to end the corruption, the era of Francetti, right? That disappeared $300,000 with lack of transparency and accountability. The finances, it was until county committee members passed a resolution to get all those finances public on the website, which I think passed, and please correct me in the chat if I'm wrong, and it's still not public yet. So we need first transparency as to where those finances are going through. For example, the Brooklyn Democratic Party argue they canceled the meeting in January because it cost according to them $5,000 to $10,000 to send a mailer to every county committee member to call up these meetings. But then in the primaries, they sent a mailer, for example, to my opponent, Tommy Torres, and others that cost thousands of dollars just to avoid them getting out of the seat. So, we don't know where the money is going through. New Kings Democrats put out a report about the finances, and the report find out how, a large amount of the money comes from charter schools and other dubious corporations that have special interests. So it is a largely strategy of big donors. We saw now the party is having a fundraiser with Schumer and others that will cost $25,000 to join, starting in $2,500. So I think it's a failing, fundraising strategy when we have so many, instead of going for voters, low donor grassroots engagement. So we need more transparency. And also make sure that district leaders and the executive committee and county committee members have a say into how that little money is spent. Because, for example, this lawsuit that is being waged and spent, into courting the engagement of the county committee members, none of the district leaders were consulted. We didn't vote for that. So we don't know how much money that lawsuits are costing, how much is costing all this legal advice. So I think we need more transparency, accountability, and ensuring that more of the grassroots of the party it's engaging and going for small dollar donations and the voters, instead of big donors that are just perpetuating that conflict of interest and undue influence into how judges are elected, and also in the party business. It's for example, Rodney's, the Brooklyn Board of Election new commissioner was part of the fundraising or finances committee of the campaign of Rodney's B-Shot. So, we're seeing how this fundraising, it just raises a lot of scrutiny as to how do we do business. We need a new model that is more community-based.
I mean, also piggybacking what Samy said, I feel like it's, if the party is not, doesn't give you confidence sorry, my neighbor suspected. If the party doesn't give you confidence in how they're spending their money, then people, everyday Democrats, I think, are not going to feel confident in giving you money. And if you're getting money from these, as Samy said, like charter schools and these corporations, like you're beholden to their values and not the values of average of Democrats in Brooklyn. And I think that's not the party that we're trying to, that's supposed to represent us, right? And when we talk about like grassroots organizing, and it's about representing our neighbors and our communities. And I think that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing on this call, like right now. That's what we've been doing the past couple of months. And I think that's what we're trying to do in the Democratic Party, right? Like we spent thousands of dollars in the primary to support these elected officials. Some who have done great work in the community, but others, who may have done some questionable things, right? And then where was that engagement and activism before? Where was that for the general? What other kind of active engagement can we do in the off years? And what are we doing to engage Brooklyn Democrats every other day, right? And what are we doing to work to build a party that is representing everyone, but is also making people feel included. And it's just like, when you see candidates run for office, right? Like you feel compelled to donate because they share a message that you feel connected to. And if I don't feel like connected to the party in wanting to give them $25, I mean, I'm not going to give them $2,500 because I don't have $2,500. Like that's something that is like that needs to change. So like we need to work on the way we're asking for money in order to better change that dynamic.
This is Gina. I have a question for Samy. May I ask it, or? Samy, you mentioned in particular about, first you talked about the financial fundraising of the Kings County Democratic Party, and then you talked about the fundraising of Rodney's Spashut, her own campaign. What was your statement about that? I'm in her assembly district, so I'd really like to know.
Yes. So it is nothing about her particular fundraising or her. It's an example that, for example, the new commissioner of the Board of Election came out of her campaign, worked in her campaign, I believe, working in the fundraising. So when we're talking about reforming the Board of Election and when things are and let me tell you, the commissioner is extremely qualified woman, a professional that has all the qualities, right? But when we're talking about the way that we're talking about fundraising and how overlaps with this other positions in which the Democratic Party has some influence is like the Board of Election that should be a professional, independent, non-partisan board. It raises question of conflict of interest. So I don't believe that anyone who worked on a campaign of, especially on the finances, should be, considered for a position such as the Board of Election. And it's tied because I'm talking about a larger conversation that needs to happen about the reforming of Board of Election, making it more professional and making sure that those positions are, done by independent organizations rather than the party itself.
Assemblymember Carroll, did you want to say something?
Hi, all. This is Assemblymember. Yes, thank you, Sarah. I just wanted to say I would be very reticent if I were a party activist in wanting to see the Kings County Democratic Party or any county party in New York to raise large sums of money. I personally raise money, for my assembly campaigns, and you can see we itemize every single contribution. The party itself has lots and lots of ways to not itemize certain contributions, to take unbelievably large sums of money from certain donors. And I would hope that folks would urge the party to not raise large sums of money. It would be better if we had party activists like yourself focusing in and helping raise money directly for your preferred state senate or assembly candidate or city council candidate or congressional candidate. Parties, be they the Kings County Party or be they the CCC, have ways of unbelievably foolishly or in ways that most folks, when they give the money, would not want it to be spent.
Hi, this is Jesse. I just want to say I agree with all the points made here. Samy and Assemblymember Carroll, I think, also makes a strong point. A couple of things that I think are just direct actions that people in this group can take, and then I also just really want to highlight the importance of the districts that you live in. So one is, it sounds like I think a lot of you are already on county committee, and so you're doing that work to get involved. And then the next part would be engaging with your district leaders. If they are currently not voting and representing you, then you have every right to tell them whether you're a county committee member or not. And I think that what we're seeing with this broader participation, we saw a lot of people who signed up to be poll workers for the first time in this election. There are a lot of ways to get involved. And even if people are focusing on national elections, these are people who are inclined to spend energies to change our political process. And so I think that if you can find these people and have conversations with them about how to direct those activities locally, those are really great conversations to have with your neighbor, so that you have a relationship and also a similar lived experience in what's going on. But also, I think Samy brought up AOC and the article around the grassroots energy of the Democratic Party and how our current leadership tends to ignore it, is that because Brooklyn and a lot of the districts that we represent are overwhelmingly blue, and that is not the case in your districts, we have an opportunity to really engage with neighbors like on the front lines with these conversations. Like, how can we expand the Democratic base in parts of Brooklyn that are not overwhelmingly blue, and really understand what these people are thinking about and caring about to vote a different way or to register with the Democratic Party. And then what are ways that we can take that to upstate races, or we can take that to races outside of New York. And I think the point being that people were dismissive of AOC because her district is overwhelmingly Democrat, but that's not always the case. And so as district leaders, I think that a lot of us feel like we should be chief organizers within our district. And so there are experiences to be had in your districts and working with district leaders, or again, having conversations with them if they're not going the way that voting the way that you want them to. And then how do we make that change person by person? Because it's the door knocking and the conversations, and then focusing on the next round of change, the next round of elections that really tends to sway things. And I think that's the stuff we saw in Georgia with Stacey Abrams. That's where you start to light these fires you don't see initially, but hopefully overwhelmingly you just have the conversations that turn the tide.
Yeah, and to quickly add to that, another way into get involved, as Jesse mentioned, is to follow those district leaders, whether it's your district leader or the ones that voted no against this rule, because this fight will continue. This lawsuit could drag, and we need to continue. We will be advocating for these meetings to happen so we can engage county committee members. And until that meeting happens, some assembly district committees that were able to wanted to be formed cannot be constituted yet. So there's a lot that happened around that meeting that we would like to see it happening.
Another good thing to point out for folks who are planning to speak with their district leaders and advocate for a meeting to be held is that Queens and Manhattan held virtual meetings. So there is definitely a path and examples for how we can successfully do this in Brooklyn. And I think that's important just to note for district leaders as well, if it's helpful.
Marion, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, it's writing on the last few comments. I was a poll worker for the first time ever on November 3rd. And the surprising thing for me is more than 10%, maybe around 11 or 12% of the people had to come back and say, oh, I made a mistake on this ballot form. Can I have another one? Now you get 3 chances. That's not a problem. So I thought to myself, 10% or 11%, that's pretty high. So I looked over to the next desk, which is the next ED. It was the same percentage. Now about 10 to 12% of the people make a mistake. Well, what does it say about that ballot form? You know, in terms of helping people make a choice. That's a huge problem right there, both in terms of having the party do something about it, and as well as education. I mean, they should either have a competition on the best design or do some studies or something. I mean, this is a very handleable problem. 12% of normal, decent people, that's a huge percentage.
Yeah. So I wanted to piggyback, and I've been careful throughout this to speak not for anyone. These are the questions our group came up with. But just as an individual, our group had agreed to endorse Senator Gunardes, and I had done a lot of the outreach on that. A lot of people on this call will know because I begged them to please show up to phone bank. Many of you guys did, which was awesome. And it kind of boggles my mind that the party could have had a much wider audience ready to phone bank and ready to show up to the polls. This is something Peter pointed out, people who are already highly motivated to do so, and then just kind of didn't. So I'm wondering, going forward, we're still going to have this very purple part of Brooklyn if they're seeing the same thing I do.
Just real quick, as someone in Gunardes's district, I've been talking to a lot of people, or even just friends of mine in the area. A lot of them are very, they don't know about, they're not informed about local races, especially if it comes to assembly and things like that. So it's a lot of them have a lot of questions, which I'm always ready to answer. That's the point. That's the reason I wanted to be a Democratic County Committee member. So I think that, that has helped a lot of the locals here kind of know what's going on, but it does seem kind of confusing that in a district that is so dangerously close, supposedly, why are we not reaching out to people? And I want to say I think there's a younger group of people in this district that people aren't really recognizing. They think that a lot of the district here is older. I think I think a lot of the younger people don't know how to get activated in voting in this district because everyone's like, it's so conservative, or it's like people are confused. And I think that we need to be reaching out, especially in South Brooklyn, for that reason. There are a lot of young working class people who want to be active and don't really know where to go and who to talk to.
Can I ask a question?
So,
sorry.
Oh, I have a couple of thoughts on that, but I'm happy to.
No, go ahead.
So a couple of things. One, Marion, thank you for being a poll worker. I also want to reiterate Kristina's point about just educating on ranked choice voting, because if you think the 10% is a high number, I imagine with ranked choice voting, it's going to be even higher. And it's going to be confusing for a lot of people. So any education on the doors for helping people vote ranked choice voting. But I think, Megan and Peter, thank you for sharing your earlier experiences. I think one thing I want to point out is that Brooklyn historically, from a political engagement perspective, has been really focused on political clubs like this one. And so when we think about the engagement of getting people out to Good Artists or Matilda Fuentes' campaign, the communication from the party, and I think we all got the same emails from the executive director, deputy executive director, was these campaigns need help, reach out to your clubs. And shout out to Kristina for highlighting this very point in the meeting where we all voted no on the rules changes, that by not having the county committee organizing meeting, you're foregoing this audience of hundreds, if not thousands, of engaged county committee members who are ready to, knock on doors or help out on local campaigns, especially in this very pivotal election, as Samy pointed out. So I think it's also a little bit of a sea change in how people are politically active within Brooklyn. There are people here who have alignment with clubs, but don't have this loyalty or this like you come from these clubs and that's how you get involved. And that's a change in how people are getting active and engaged within the party. And I think the formation of ADCs is really important with these change, where it's people who want to be members of the Democratic Party and want to do things like voter registration drives or just voter education, things that are that just tend to be about like civic participation versus club involvement. And so this is truly a change in how long, and a lot of the district leaders have been in these roles for years and years and years, and this is how they think. And so when we get these emails from the party, it's tell your clubs to go out for these campaigns, and it's just not how a lot of us are thinking about this work these days. And so I do just want to highlight that is something that I think we all need to work together to kind of understand this shift and how we get people involved and use the tools at our disposal, like email addresses and Zoom calls and web conferences. So anyway, those are all the things I just wanted to share.
And Jesse, you're so right that it has to go beyond the clubs, because this is a time of huge change. And the last time, well, actually, it was the only time we got together in ADC 44. We were in a room of, say, about 50 people. I would say every one of those people in there is a rock star in terms of being a live wire in the community in many, many ways on different issues. I mean, it was the hottest networking room you could get into. So I think that, with the county committee rule changes, the county organization is essentially committing organizational suicide in terms of cutting off all the county committee members, live wires into every sector of the community.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's why it's so critical to have, all of you participating and using your voices, and even the plaintiffs in the lawsuit and those of us who voted no against the rules. It's just critical because we know how important this is, that we use every tool at our disposal to fight it and keep sharing information and keep working together as a block to say, no, this is wrong. And that you shouldn't shut us out because we're the energy and we're the change, and that moves beyond just Brooklyn in New York. Again, like I just think that there's a really clean tie between the work that everyone's doing on a day-to-day basis here organizing Brooklyn and what that can mean across the country for Democrats and what the stakes are if we don't do this. So thank you all for all of your energies and all of your organizing.
Yeah, thank you so much to all of our speakers and to everyone for attending. Thank you.
May I ask a question for people to think about? I mean, this is not, we can't answer this today. I'm just curious about, is it worth reaching out to red voters? I say red, not Republican, because welcome to Senator Felder's district where the registered Democrats vote Republican, okay? So Biden has been talking a lot about unity, and I get where he's coming from, but seems easy to say when you're white and heterosexual. So I understand that the class system is getting worse. It's been getting worse in America since the 80s, but I guess people are seeing that the class system has not gotten better. So even if Democrats intend well, it's not working out. And I'm very concerned about the Senate right now because Mitch McConnell is not going to allow anything to go through. So then my question is, how do you reach these people? And at the same time, how do you talk to people? Because it's hard for me necessarily to want to talk to someone who is okay with them taking kids away from parents, understanding with cult mentality, you can justify things in your head like, oh, Trump didn't mean it, and it was supposed to show American was tough. So I don't know what I'm asking. Just how do we do this with people who weren't necessarily Dem or on the fence? Sorry.
I have thoughts about this, but I've also talked a lot, so.
Yeah. I also just wanted to say in general, after 2016, and we were all in shock and many people formed this group, I personally did the thing I was supposed to do, which was call my senators and congressional representative Nadler, and this isn't calling them out specifically, and I got on their email list, and all it is fundraising. And it's so discouraging that a lot of the messaging, 90% or more of the messaging we get is just give us more money for this, when again, like Max Rose lost the most expensive congressional race. I know money's important in some of these, but the guy who may have beat Frontis raised less than $16,000, like $1,600. Like, it's clearly not the only thing. Is there a plan, or should there be a plan to get our local Democrat electeds to better direct us to these vulnerable campaigns? I mean, not like a thing we have to do today.
Sorry. So your question was, is there a way that we can
ask, you know, Representatives Clark, Nadler, other prominent Brooklyn elected officials to better direct their own base to, like, instead of just donate to like the DCC, maybe volunteer in New York 11 in 2022, that kind of thing. If there's a plan to approach them, or if we have approached them. There was a New York Times article about how a lot of the Upper East Side donated money to these like Senate campaigns that were really improbable. But again, we had 3 vulnerable Democrats in the same city who, well, at least one of them actually did lose.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't have a good answer to this. I think, except that I think the Brooklyn Democratic Party, from my experience, doesn't do a lot of organizing or pressure on existing electeds that could be helpful to down ballot Democrats. So at the very least, there's no pressure that my understanding is being put on these electeds. So there is a lot of space for that too. And I think there just wasn't a lot of attention paid to these, as much attention as there could have been, I think, to like Andrew Gennardis or Mathilde Frentis or Max Rose. I think there was some attention, but not enough. And then I think just to touch quickly on Naomi's question before, I think there are ways of expanding the electorate that don't include like putting yourself in danger for people that are clearly not, their minds are not going to be changed. You know, Megan mentioned there may be younger voters in the district, so maybe it's active outreach and registering voters. I know Shaquana does a lot of work with youth and youth vote in the 57th, so she has a lot of, I think, ideas on that. And then also just making sure that communities that are historically oppressed and don't have access to the polls are given that access, historically communities of color. Is there broader language access? So there's a lot, and I think that that model has been proven across the nation, is that where are people who have historically not been encouraged to vote and participate and are more vulnerable communities, so are hurt the most when policy changes are very draconian. These are communities that as Democrats, I think we should be doing active outreach to in order to expand the electorate. And yeah, Sarah, I think I bring up a great point. I don't think that there's a good answer, except that there's just like not a lot of cohesiveness and not a lot of teamwork from what I've observed.
Alana, you wanted to speak briefly?
I asked it in the chat, so I'm okay. Thank you.
All right. This was really awesome. Thank you again to everyone who joined us on their Sunday night, especially Samy, as this was your day of rest. But all of you, thank you so much for joining and contributing to this lively discussion. And looks like we have a lot of work to do coming up.
Sorry. Can I speak on another issue? I didn't know if you guys.
Go nuts. Yes.